It began with a photograph, a single grainy image taken from 70,000 feet above the Earth, one that nearly brought the world to nuclear annihilation. The year was 1962. The Cold War had divided the world into two camps, the United States and the Soviet Union, both armed to the teeth with enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet several times over. But in October of that year, a series of secret moves, bold decisions, and a 13-day standoff would push humanity closer to extinction than ever before. This is the story of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest the world has ever come to World War III. It all began just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, on the island of Cuba. In 1959, a young revolutionary named Fidel Castro had overthrown the US-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista. At first, Washington was cautious, hoping Castro might be a nationalist reformer. But it quickly became clear that he was moving toward communism and toward the Soviet Union. By 1961, Cuba and the US were enemies. That April, the CIA backed a failed invasion by Cuban exiles at a place called the Bay of Pigs. It was a humiliating disaster for the new American president, John F. Kennedy. Castro's forces crushed the invasion, and the young leader turned fully toward Moscow for protection. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev saw an opportunity and a way to strike back. The United States had already placed nuclear missiles in Turkey and Italy, aimed directly at the Soviet heartland. So Khrushchev came up with a bold idea: place Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, right under America's nose. It would balance the nuclear threat and show the world that the USSR was not afraid to challenge US power. So, in the summer of 1962, Soviet ships quietly began transporting nuclear missiles, launchers, and thousands of soldiers to Cuba. The operation was cloaked in secrecy. Even Cuban civilians didn't know what was being built. But on October 14th, an American U-2 spy plane flying over the island took photographs. Photographs that showed unmistakable evidence of nuclear missile sites under construction. When those images reached the White House, President Kennedy was stunned. The missiles could reach Washington, New York, and most of the continental United States in just minutes. The balance of power had shifted overnight. The president immediately called together a group of advisors known as the Executive Committee, or EXCOM. Military generals urged an immediate airstrike to destroy the missile sites before they became operational. Others pushed for a full-scale invasion of Cuba. But Kennedy feared that any attack could trigger a Soviet response in Europe, possibly leading to nuclear war. Instead, he chose a middle path, a naval quarantine around Cuba. On October 22nd, Kennedy went on national television and revealed the shocking truth to the American people. His voice was calm, but the message was chilling. Soviet nuclear missiles had been discovered in Cuba, and any launch would be considered an attack on the United States. The world held its breath. In the days that followed, US Navy ships surrounded the island, intercepting and inspecting Soviet vessels. One wrong move, one miscommunication, could have meant nuclear war. The world's fate balanced on a knife's edge. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Khrushchev faced a dilemma of his own. He hadn't expected the Americans to discover the missiles so soon or react so strongly. The Soviet leader wanted to protect Cuba and strengthen his global image. But he knew that an all-out confrontation could destroy both nations. Behind the scenes, frantic messages passed between Washington and Moscow. Both sides tested each other's limits. On October 24th, Soviet ships approached the blockade, then suddenly turned back. It was a small victory for Kennedy, but the missiles in Cuba were still there, armed and ready. Then, on October 27th, what historians call Black Saturday, the world nearly ended. That morning, another American U-2 plane was shot down over Cuba, killing the pilot. US generals demanded retaliation. At the same time, a US Navy destroyer dropped depth charges near a Soviet submarine that was carrying a nuclear torpedo. The submarine's crew, cut off from Moscow and thinking war had already started, prepared to launch. Only one man, Vasily Arkhipov, the submarine's second-in-command, refused to authorize the strike. His calm judgment likely saved the world from nuclear destruction. That same night, Khrushchev sent a desperate message to Kennedy, offering a deal. The Soviets would remove their missiles from Cuba if the US promised not to invade the island. The next day, a second harsher message arrived, demanding that the US also remove its missiles from Turkey. Tensions soared. But Kennedy, realizing time was running out, publicly accepted the first offer, while secretly agreeing to the second. It was a diplomatic masterstroke. On October 28, Khrushchev announced that the Soviet missiles in Cuba would be dismantled. The ships turned around. The war that could have destroyed the world was over. For 13 days, humanity had stared into the abyss, and in the end, reason, not rage, had prevailed. The Cuban Missile Crisis forever changed the way the world saw nuclear power. A hotline was established between Washington and Moscow to ensure direct communication. Both nations began to pursue arms control agreements, realizing that one misunderstanding could mean the end of civilization. But perhaps the most remarkable thing was this. In the deadliest standoff in human history, no shots were fired. And as the world exhaled in relief, two men, Kennedy and Khrushchev, stood on opposite sides of the planet, knowing they had both won and lost something. They had preserved peace, but had seen just how fragile that peace truly was. Because in October 1962, for 13 long days, the world came closer to destruction than ever before, and only a few wise decisions kept it alive.